made like a short presentation, very, very short, just to kind of show what I do if some of you don't know what I do. So I'm a 3D artist. I'm currently in Minneapolis. I'm originally from Sri Lanka. That's where I grew up. I moved to the US to go to school, to college, and now I'm currently full-time freelancing a 3D character artist, let's say. So I kind of came into this field from kind of a that kind of a sideways. I didn't really go to art school, but in high school I was always like into art. But I think in Sri Lanka I didn't know anyone who worked professionally, and it wasn't really a career that I knew that it was possible. So I went into engineering. So I did mechanical engineering, and I worked in engineering for about 14 years. So it's been a while. I worked in robotics, medical devices, automation. So I was a senior mechanical engineer for a while. And now I finally kind of pivoted back to kind of what I wanted to do in the beginning. It's kind of a crazy ride, but I say like as far as like immigration goes and like moving to the US, being in a STEM program kind of helped me in a way. Thinking back, I don't think any other way would have worked out as well as the way I've done it. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm always interested in both like the technical and the creative aspects of it. And some of the engineering things I've done did offer that. Um, yeah, so like I said, I'm currently working as a full-time 3D character artist. I'm just gonna hold on, continue. These are some of the things I like work on. Some of them, most of these are like my own things, but some of them are references, like the one in the middle here. Um, so these are all my works. I'm just gonna kind of go over them. So in 20, I would say I started getting into 3D around 2017. I went to like an animation expo, and it kind of like blew my brain. I'm like, well, this is kind of within reach. So so I started kind of going like deep into characters and like stylized things. And in 2021, I did like a sculpt a day for a whole year of the year of 2021. So it's like every day I did a character in ZBrush. So that kind of coincided with like the lockdown. So I was like fully working from home at the time in a different field. But I took like, my lunch breaks and like my commuting time, which I didn't have to spend on commuting anymore, and like just focusing on making 3D art. So that's uh, kind of where I kind of kicked off really on sculpting, I would say. So it really like helped me like imagine and like create forms in my head, like visualize it as I'm making it. Um, so I mean, I would highly recommend it to anybody who, I mean, not every day create a character, but like doing it every day, like it really sends like the technical stuff into the background, and you can kind of focus on like what's at hand. Um, so so today I'm going to show you guys some of the ways I go from like block out to like final. Um, and like I'm calling this character design in 3D because um, this is kind of a method. I want to give some credit. If you guys know like Leticia Gillett, she's like one of my mentors. She's a Disney supervisor now. Uh, so I kind of learned some of it from her, and I kind of made my own stuff, where you're kind of designing characters as you go, as you're blocking it out, and you get to a stage where you're like pushing and pulling shapes to the point where you're almost like sketching in 3D. So and it's important to know how to do that because kind of today, just talking with a lot of modelers who are in the industry, it's not enough to be able to just model a concept. like seeing a concept and like seeing it one-to-one, that's impressive. That's a skill you need to do. That's like the job most likely you're hired to do as a 3D character artist. But a lot of the times you're handed like napkin sketches or ideas, like we need a character, 7 years old, and he's like he likes to play this game, and he's got like this kind of style with like this kind of eyes. Can you put it together? You know, so it's like you need to also be able to like create these things as you're modeling them. Um, so that's kind of what we'll try to get into today. So I'll block out an elephant. So um, we'll see how far we get there with that. But I'm gonna share a blend file that I have. Let me load it up real quick here. Hopefully you guys can see my screen share just fine. Oh, nope, that's not it. Okay, is it? Good, we're good.
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
good. Because sometimes when I have rendered mode on, Blender doesn't like to share things. Get a black screen, but okay, we're seeing it. So this is an example where like I'm not exactly sure what the final design is gonna be like, but I play a lot with like the blockout, and I get to the point where I'm like happy with like the overall design of the dog. And then I get to a point, okay, yeah, now I can take this dog, like the blockout, and take it into final. So we're not going to be talking about like how we go from here to here, but more like how do we get here to the point like, okay, what kind of shapes do I use and how do I quickly block out something like this? So I have some other models here. Um, it's a little bunny. Um, you can see like I'm purely just using like just very primitive shapes. If I show the wireframe, they're all like basically like a cube ball. So I'm like that's how I'm basically blocking everything out. And then from that I go to the final model. Um, Here's an example. This guy, um, and got the raccoon here. This is a big file because I've loaded up all these models. Um, and here's this guy. So this one you can tell like I mean obviously I modeled this whole thing in Pose. So I blocked it out in Pose, and this is by from a concept by Grace Liu. Um, and she's I think right now a storyboard artist at DreamWorks. I'm not exactly sure her title is, but amazing like shapes in her concepts. So by blocking it out, I was able to capture like kind of the mood I'm going for with this. And then I didn't model it from here to here. I actually modeled some of these characters in T-pose, and then I blocked it, and I matched what the block is. And sometimes, if I'm not sure of the shapes of the characters, I will have to like take a posed block out and neutralize it, meaning unpose it into like a neutral pose, and then model the character, and then go back into the pose. Um, so that's another technique. Here is a lion. Yeah, so this one like also like a lot of anatomy. I'm not like an expert on animal anatomy. There's so many, different types of anatomy. Like for the most part, when it comes to animals like quadrupeds and like vertebrates, they basically have the same anatomy as humans, like elbows, knees, and heels. You just have to like know where to place them. Um, so like just remember the big landmarks, and then you like um, then you get some good animal references, and then you start blocking it out. Can you guys hear me? Okay, my headset turned off for a second. I don't know why it did that. Weird. All right. Any questions on these? I think it'll start making a little bit more sense once I get into ZBrush. The main thing is for me when I'm like doing the design in 3D, this process of going from blockout to final, once you do it a few times, you start to see the final during the blockout. So you start making decisions like, okay, I'm gonna have eyes like this. So and just like when you're doing a 2D sketch, from a rough sketch, you can kind of see what the final is gonna look like. So when you're doing the blockout, the more you do it, the easier it kind of gets to go from blockout to final. All right.
Ryan has a question for you.
Oh, go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, so I was wondering, how do you approach fur? Like, for instance, on that dog.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Um, so like, I try to like when I'm doing stylized for like this, I try to keep like the design concepts in mind, like have some clumps, large, medium, and small forms, so that kind of thing. It's a lot of playing around. Um, this might be baked down, but no. So I'm like I've made like these shapes, and I think I used like in Blenders there's a geometry system that I use to make these special fur shapes, and then I
Mhm.
like place them. I know there's like in ZBrush there's like these brushes you can use um, to make like kind of a fur brush. But the only issue with that, once you put it down, like you can't really change it. Whereas if you do it in Blender, you can kind of change it.
Mhm.
So I always like to like sometimes I'll block it out in ZBrush so I can get a good idea, and then I'll come back to Blender and I'll do it inside of Blender.
I do the same sometimes, like with sometimes when I do fur, I do it like with those curves, but
hmm
it always, for me, the end result, like it always stands out a lot from the base model. And with yours, it looks seamless in like the rendered view.
hmm
Um, so how do you get it to
Yeah,
mesh well?
yeah, it's a little bit tricky. It does help when it comes into a point. Um, uh, yeah, it's a lot about matching the color and materials as well. Um, um, and just being able to suggest it a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, there's really no like special trick to it, like technically. Um, it's just a lot to do with just how you place it. You just have to play around with it a lot. Um, um, yeah, I
Okay.
spent hours just like twirling around these curves.
Yeah.
Um, like then full heads of hair with this stuff. It's well, after a while you get kind of used to it. Um, yeah, yeah. I think like for example, just like from just behind the scenes, like this is just a geometry system. I don't think this section is doing anything, but it's basically doing like a profile where it's like tapering to the edge. So I'm kind of playing with like a special profile. I don't even know if that's doing anything actually. Because sometimes in Blender the profile doesn't look so great. Um, so I try to play around with it. Um, but yeah, it's pretty straightforward, I would say. It's just a matter of placing it. I used to do a lot of like actual fur systems in Blender, and as fun as it is, like, and it kind of looks kind of cool. Um, at the end of the day, I'm really after like the design and like the silhouette of the character. So I find it like not that interesting. Yeah. Also, like render times are pretty crazy. Um, too. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. If there isn't any questions, we can jump into ZBrush.
There is one more question in the
Oh,
chat.
okay.
Besides your mentor, are there any specific process resources that you use early in your journey?
Mm. So like I said, I came from like a technical background, so I did a lot of like Blender tutorials because there was like the one accessible software, at the time. I mean, even now, because I kind of came from a different industry. So, Blender and ZBrush, Michael Pavlovich is like the guy for ZBrush if you want to learn like anything to do with technical things inside of ZBrush. Um, he will go through the entire UI, and like he knows every function and what every button does. So he's been a pretty good resource. Rafael Grassetti, you might know him. He is like one of the best sculptors, I would say, in the world for when it comes to like characters. If you
What was his name?
Rafael Grassetti, he made Kratos in God of War. He's like a art director at Sony Santa Monica. I met him a couple of times, and he's been. I've taken a few of his courses, and I think that's really helped me out personally. Um, yeah. And then like just various things on the internet, especially um, just kind of absorbing like what you like and figuring out what you like is important for 3D because especially for 3D, you really need to be passionate about the thing you're making because you're going to be spending a ton of time on it. Sometimes they're not so fun. Sometimes like topology, so if you're gonna like spend that much time, you should like it and like do a subject that you like in that style. Um, so um, in addition to like the class and the resources, just building that art kind of mood board for yourself. Um, I actually have like a massive PureF board, but then it got too big, so I started moving everything to Miro, which is more of a cloud-based thing. And it doesn't use as much memory. Um, but yeah, and when it comes to Blender, something you gotta watch out for. There's a ton of tutorials on Blender online, and half of them aren't great. Half of them will like lead you astray. So you really have to kind of figure out, is this a good artist? Or do they know what they're talking about? How much Blender do they know? You know, like as far as how many years of Blender have they taught or know about? Um, I started with CG Cookie. They're like a little small, like a platform for learning. Um, they're not like, I wouldn't say like amazing, but everybody there like know everything there about Blender. So even if they're not like, really top level, like weather level artists, they will know exactly what Blender does. Um, so things like that you got to watch out for. Um, yeah, is that kind of helpful or I'm just talking here? Yeah. All right. Um, okay, we got half an hour and we'll jump into ZBrush. Is there more questions? I
Yeah,
don't think.
I had a quick question. How do you spell the guy's name that you mentioned was like one of the greatest 3D sculptors?
Rafael Grassetti,
Grassetti. How do you spell Grassetti?
uh, Grasstitti, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I've taken like he's got like a really kick-ass anatomy course. And I've taken like I think there's a female one and a male one. Those are pretty good. I think for 3D anatomy, I think they're both on Gumroad. Yeah, and in general, like he's got a ton of experience and he's like very accurate, I would say, when it comes to sculpting. But he does like mainly like games, like realistic stuff, and not like, you know, like stylized stuff. Like, all right. All right, I'm gonna change windows here. Getting into ZBrush. All right, hopefully this aspect ratio is okay. Okay, ZBrush. Oh, before we dive into ZBrush, I want to kind of show you my mood board. So I thought we'll do an elephant, keep it pretty simple, but maybe stylize it. So I picked a bunch of references from the internet. Um, you know, I try to get like as like try not to go super crazy on the references with stylized stuff. Um, because if you're like kind of designing your own thing, you don't want to like go too close to like an existing design or let that dominate your design. Um, so this one is by Priscilla something. Just found it on Pinterest, and this one is from Jungle Book. That I think is an original cell painting from Jungle Book. And the rest of it is some elephants. They are pretty funny. These are all African elephants. And how you tell is that their ears are in the shape of Africa. I don't know if you guys knew that. Whereas the Asian elephants have smaller ears. In Sri Lanka, we have a lot of elephants, and they are pretty wild, literally and figuratively. Okay, so that's kind of what I'm looking at. I'm going to jump back into ZBrush here. Okay. So feel free to ask questions. Will I do this? I'm just gonna go over a couple of UI things that I made. So I made these like two custom menus. And you can make a custom menu in ZBrush by going preferences, config, I believe. Yeah, enable customize, and you can create like an empty UI or new custom panel. So I made two custom panels and I loaded them up with like the stuff that I use all the time. And then I assign a shortcut so it'll like pop up those two panels. So then I don't have to go like digging through like these menus all the time. And then I have like a couple of other shortcuts, like tab kind of gets rid of like the surrounding stuff. And then like there's like these trays, they call them, that you press this button to turn open and close. I have another shortcut to kind of close them both and open them both at the same time. Yeah, but so let's get started here. So I always like to start with that sphere, right? It says Q sphere with like four, you know, loops, I guess, on all sides, and it creates this. When I Control W, I probably want like call out everything I'm doing. So if you have questions, just let me know. And you might know that in ZBrush there's a smooth brush. There's two smooth brushes. Well, that's actually like there's like actually a dozen smooth brushes. Like if you have like a thing here, and if you smooth it, it does that, right? But if you're smoothing and you let go of shift and keep going, you can see like it maintains the shape of the sphere. That so like I'll do it again. So if I smooth it here, it's just gonna do this. But if I start smoothing and let go of shift and keep smoothing, it's gonna try and like maintain the shape based on what's around it. So, and this smooth brush, this smooth is very useful for keeping surfaces very, very clean when you're doing stylized characters. So that's pretty useful and important. I'm gonna get rid of that tool here. So we have this, I'm gonna resize it a little bit. All right, and then I just like use the gizmo and I hold down control and I pull out new shapes, and that's how I begin blocking the shapes here. So we're doing an elephant, so we got the head and the body. Do that one shape here. Also, I hit auto groups to make them different polygroups. And we'll keep the dynamic subdiv on. This is not applied subdiv. It's just this shows a smoother surface, and sometimes I like to bump it up so that it's even smoother. If I can find the panel. This is one of the things about ZBrush. Lots of menus. I'm gonna change my material as well here. Yeah, so sometimes, it's nice to have those like shortcuts, like, so I'll just do this and I'm working in full screen. Like, otherwise sometimes I'll find myself working like a really small screen like this and it gets kind of claustrophobic. And there's another script I made in ZBrush. So you guys, is a lot of people here familiar with ZBrush, or am I? Okay, good. I guess some knowledge. So in ZBrush, there's a thing called polygroups where like you can have, I'm gonna add another sphere again. So like this sphere, this one color blue is one polygroup, so I can mask it and I can make this mask another polygroup. Um, Control W is a shortcut for that. So now this is a different polygroup from this, and this is really useful because you can isolate that. And then you can do things like, pull it out or something, and then it'll be a different thing. So as you can imagine, like if you have different polygroups, your arms and things like that, like, and your arms are like doing something crazy, like it's crossed or something, and you're trying to reach that finger that is like, buried in there, you can have polygroups and can isolate that finger and work on that finger. You know what I mean? So that is very useful. And if you have like multiple polygroups, I'm gonna change my mask brush to mask lasso, like this. The way you isolate this is that you hit Control Shift, isolate it, and then you can Control Tab to mask it, and then Control Shift Tab to isolate, bring everything back up, and then Control Tab to invert that. And then I think, yeah, and if you control and tap on the mask, it's gonna smooth it out. And then you can, and you have a masked version of the polygroup. So I have a little shortcut that I made that will like do that. Basically, I can hover over it. I can isolate that polygroup. It's basically doing that. Isolate, mask, unmask, invert. So I just have a macro that just does that. So if you see me just doing that, that's what I'm doing. I'm isolating a polygroup. Delete that. Okay. So I have two polygroups. I can isolate them. It's very useful. And some people in the blockout, they will, as my headset just turns off, I don't know why it does this. Some people will make new tools so they can make like duplicate oh, sorry, duplicate. And they'll have like another tool that they're working on. That is also fine. I personally like to work on one tool, which keeps this outliner very simple. And it's also easy to deal with if you're kind of exporting and importing from another software. Um, so yeah, so let's continue this. Let's make a little trunk here. Ooh, my Dynamesh is turned on. Yeah, like the blockout in the beginning for me is a lot about getting all the parts in the beginning, and then you start to play with it. And that's when like you're really looking at it from like a design standpoint. So let me get all the parts in here. Feel free to ask me questions or stop me.
We do have one question.
Mhm.
Says, is this what you do instead of or in tandems with subtools? My professor who was teaching ZBrush actually isn't familiar with this typical workflow.
Um, I don't know if hold on, let me, is it on the chat?
Yes.
To do instead of or in tandem with subtools. Yeah, so like I will separate it out to like different subtools sometimes. But for my sake, I keep it simple by having it in one subtool because it can get confusing when you have like, 20 subtools and you're like trying to find like the years or something. Um, Whereas in this, I can just isolate the trunk, you know. Um, so like I will get to a point where I will start having like multiple subtools. Um, so that's and like this is, I wouldn't say like this is necessarily isn't like sculpting, like it's sculpting, but you mainly using like the big brushes. Like you can see I'm just using the move brush, like maxed out, like so you're just moving around big shapes. You're just like really pushing those polygons um, to a point just to get like the overall feel for it. Um, so um, get a little tail going here. Mm, Gotta keep mirror on. Yeah, you hit X to turn mirror on and off. Yeah. Yes, for the most part, I will also try to keep like wireframe, which is here on so that I can see what I'm doing. Um, some people don't like that. Take a look at references here.
Sorry, I didn't catch it, but were you able to duplicate like the legs and the ears mirroring the body, or did you position those yourself?
Um, yeah, I mirrored it, if that.
This
So like the back, I moved one leg to the back and then I mirrored that into the other side.
this is fascinating. I have not been able to figure this out. It would have saved me so much time and headache. Sorry.
Yeah, and sometimes, yeah, so let's so I'm hitting like auto groups, which creates polygroups everywhere, but you can see like left and right polygroups don't match. So I'll hit like mirror and weld to like equalize both sides.
That's
So
awesome.
so here's another like feature of like the smooth alternate brush. So if I start smoothing, it's just gonna do shrink literally. But if I start smoothing and really smooth, which is the alternate smooth, it will like turn into spheres again. So that is just how the alternate smooth works. Um, um, let's see. Got a little leg here.
We do have 15 minutes left.
Okay. I don't think I can finish this in 15 minutes, but I want to get to the point where I'm like thinking about the design. Hopefully we'll get there. Yeah, it's a lot like real clay when you're trying to get like all the masses in, and then you can start digging in, you know. Okay, another brush I'm going to use here is like I'll use a move brush, and if I use move, like let's see, I'll show it on the ears. So if I use a move, it's going to do this, right? If you turn on backface masking on, which is like masks the back faces and it won't touch the back faces, you can use a move brush to make things thicker. And that can be very useful for like, you know, fingers specifically, but in this case, the trunk. So so here's where I'm gonna add in a new tool, a subtool, and I'm gonna add eyes. Let's get some color. Let's turn on material and RGB on, fill it. Let's go brighter. And then I'm gonna mask this, make a new poly group there, and isolate that, fill it with black. And you can also like, if you hit Control Shift X, it'll grow the mask. Or whatever, draw the selection of the mask. So I got a eyeball. So let me take a look at my references here for elephant. All right, well, we got a lot of the shapes in. So now we can start thinking a little bit about proportions of the elephant. So in one of the references, you can really tell, I'm sorry, you can't see this, but like the shape of the ear is very interesting for elephants because they have like these hard edges. Kind of look like this. It's kind of interesting. So I want to get that. And like baby elephants, it's kind of cute that the bodies aren't very like wide and they're kind of narrow on the legs. So they got clearly big heads and tiny feet. Um, so what I'm doing there is I'm selecting with this and I'm Control Shift Q. Sorry, Control Shift, yeah, Control Shift Q to grow the selection to the poly group. And then I'm masking that, unmasking, and inverting that mask, and then I'll mask this too. So I think I'm kind of doing this quickly, but when you work in ZBrush for a while, like the UI is very quirky and like the controls are sometimes don't make any sense. But I think the key is to kind of do it a little bit every day, and you'll kind of get used to it like a game, and hopefully you don't have to think about it anymore. It'll be like in the back of your head. Yeah. So I hit auto groups, mirror and weld. Yeah, it's coming together.
You have a
I'm gonna,
question.
mhm.
Do you constantly go through Z remesh subdivision levels in your workflow or stick to Dynamesh? What is your approach?
Yeah, I use subdivision and Z remesh if I were to do this character, but I will use Dynamesh for other things. Um, hmm. If it's like a more fantastical character with like tentacles coming out and craziness, I'll use Dynamesh because that would be hard to like block out with simple shapes like this. But in this scenario, it's mainly like subdividing it. Um, so here I will turn off Dynamesh and I will subdivide it. So it's like real subdivisions versus the fake ones. So I went up to 4 levels. Once you reach a state where you feel like, okay, I'm done with moving small shapes, I need like more resolution. You can start subdividing. We can keep it at 2 for now, and then can like maybe like push in some shapes here. So I'm using the standard brush. Let's go to the high subdivision here. Damn standard. So this elephant is looking crazy. Yeah, one thing I play around with like a lot of stylized characters is like the distance between the eyes. Like if you want to make them like cute, especially like you'd obviously go big eyes, but try to have like a bigger head on top. Like the forehead from the eye level is you can make it bigger and then like bring the eyes closer to the mouth, which we forgot to block in. So I'm gonna hold on. I'm gonna duplicate this, delete, delete. I created a new subtool just for the mouth. And there's another tool in here that you can reconstruct the subdivisions. Um, if you ever apply the subdivisions and you want to get it back, you can like hit that button.
So you have another question.
Mhm.
So we should Dynamesh throughout the process and only do Z remesh subdivision levels when it comes to time for detailing.
Um, what was the
Questions there.
question? Was there a question in there or comment?
It's under the by Abby.
Oh.
That's about
Do you
process.
constantly, so we should Dynamesh through the process and only do zero mesh subdivision levels when it comes to, yeah, that's the way to work on it. I like to work like this where I'm just using like, hopefully this works. Okay, it worked. Where I'm using subdivisions because at any given time I can go to the lowest subdivision and like move around like the basic shapes. Once I'm ready to like Dynamesh, so if I'm gonna take this to a final model, I will Dynamesh it and then maybe Z-remesh it before I take it into retopology. Um, so this is basically a way of keeping things simple so you can like play around with shapes here. So I'm gonna actually shrink the eyes a little bit, maybe this. So I'm also looking at my references here. Maybe bring it in.
We have 5 minutes left.
Okay. I'll probably go a little bit over. But yeah. Auto groups. Ooh, turning into a sad elephant. But he's not sad, I promise. So this is probably where I would spend the most of the time if I'm making a new character. Just like pushing and pulling the shapes and figuring out like where like it gets appealing or if it's not appealing. Even if I was copying it from a reference, because you really want like your silhouette here to like to work. And I will use that window a lot as well. You know, you want that to read in a certain way. Um, so
Does the elephant have a name? Sammy asked.
I don't know. Be up to you guys. I did grow
Elliot,
up.
though.
Hmm?
Someone
What was
said
it?
Elliot.
Elliot. Elliot.
Elliot.
That makes sense. Elliot, the elephant. Um, I did grow up with a lot of elephants in Sri Lanka. We have a lot of wild elephants. I have ridden a few. It's actually quite fun. They're very gentle. I mean, if they're good elephants, and you're kind of up high, so that you feel kind of safe. That sounds pretty crazy when I'm saying it out loud, actually. Um, so yeah. So I'm thinking about like once I like if I'm gonna take this to final, I will like connect them out to the thing. And if this is gonna be a character that's gonna emote, like I want the mouth, and like the cheek to have some kind of function so they can smile and things like that. Um, yeah. Mm. One time, we were driving in Sri Lanka, um, and there was like an elephant in the middle of the road. Like this is like in the country, like it wasn't like a big elephant. I would say 6, 7 feet. There was like a baby elephant. It was just standing there in the middle of the road, and we just kind of stopped the car in front of it. We were just waiting. It was like an SUV type of car. And then a couple of minutes later, like the herd like showed up and like on both sides of the road. and like one of the elephants is very threatened, and like he just started walking towards the car, and my mom is like freaking out because like she's like deathly afraid of elephants, because they can be quite dangerous. Um, so this one elephant started walking backwards towards the car, and then it like kicked the car with the back leg, and then walked away with the baby. It was quite
So,
scary.
it is 9 o'clock, however, if you
Okay.
want to continue to model this, since there's no one else after you, and you're
Okay.
welcome to do so. If you guys have questions, please ask them now. I know there's one already. Abby asked, what are your tips for modeling teeth?
What was the question? Sorry.
The question was, what are your tips for modeling teeth?
Teeth. This is a great question because um, I, I've modeled teeth. There is like a thing in ZBrush. I don't want to pull up that tool. It might delete this one. Teeth for the elephant or teeth for humans? Abby.
Especially human ones.
Okay, human. Yeah. So if I were you, I would, if is it stylized or real? Either way, I would keep it like just the gum as one tool, and then like individual teeth as like separate objects on top of the gum. Because that's gonna simplify the model by a lot. I modeled like all in one piece where like each tooth is like kind of jutting out from the gum, but then the gum and the topology of the gum and the tooth are connected. And that's just gonna add so much more topology just because you want to get all those loops correct. I've done it that way. Just the easiest way, because teeth are really separate from the gums anyway, is just to have the gums as one blob, um, and then like individual teeth as the other, uh, um, just all the way around. And the thing about teeth though is that you want to be very specific. Take a look at. I always like to go into like the Pixar and the Disney movies because they have a lot of like scenes where they show the teeth. Um, um, you want to be very careful with the gaps and how much like ambient occlusion you have like showing because it can get really ugly really fast. And you want to have like varying shapes, like your canines are have more gaps around it, and your like molars and your front teeth are like normal, like rectangular. Um, but yeah, great question. Teeth. Um, yeah. So I think this elephant, I don't know. I would definitely keep going like this, where I'm like pushing the design for a very long time. Um, if you're thinking about um, modeling anything, I would say spend the most amount of your time with this face where you're blocking it out and you're trying to like get the vibe and the silhouette right. Um, because that's like your biggest impact for your final piece. Um, you can put in wrinkles and shapes and like the medium, like veins in the ears and stuff like that, but this overall like silhouette is what's just gonna stand out at the end. So it's important. This step is probably the the most bang for your buck as far as time spent. Um, yeah.
You have a question. I don't know how long you want to do this, the panel. It
I can
says
go
you
for
have
another 5 minutes or so.
another 5 minutes.
And
Okay, cool.
yeah.
This will probably be the last question then. Do you have any tips for retropology? If so, it's my
Or
least favorite part.
retopology.
Yeah, topology.
Retro topology sounds
That's
pretty
what,
good to
yeah, I
me
know.
too.
It's a long day.
It's like, um, let's see. Retopology is a tricky situation, isn't it? So I'm just gonna show you guys what I do with zero measure. Um, I'm just gonna duplicate this. So this is definitely not like my final model. Like I would definitely push this elephant a lot more to get the shapes that I like. Probably have thinner legs here, blah, 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 blah. But okay, so I'm gonna apply the subdivision. So we have a high poly elephant here. Um, and then I'll go into Dynamesh. And then one thing you can do with Dynamesh is that if you drag the resolution slider to the mesh, it'll pick the resolution of the mesh. So you have to like, keep playing around with it. So I'll Dynamesh it. So it'll do this. Very, very messy. I'll try to clean up the poly groups here. And then I'm going to try and use the poly groups to create the retopology. That makes any sense. Um, so like things like this, I will try to open up a little more, stuff like that. But I kind of want maybe a little bit less raccoon eyes going, you know? Um, Obviously, this is not how you would do for the final model, but this is a really quick way of doing it. So what I did there was polish by groups, and that's under polygroups, I believe, in this menu. Uh, Groups, polygroups, polypaint. Somewhere in here, I think it's deformation. Yeah, polish by group under the deformation. So if you hit that, it's going to do clean up those edges. And if you zero mesh with keep groups on, it's gonna keep those polygroup borders um, kind of um, there and like do like a zero mesh with that on. And then you can do it again. I just polished it a little bit more. Hit half and zero mesh. So it's gonna kind of get to like a point where you have a decent looking poly group. Um, Another thing you can do is you can go back to the point where you had before you zero mesh, control click to add like a marker in history. And then you can subdivide this and then project history. And then you got like, the details that you lost back into the new uh, zero mesh model. Okay, so obviously this zero mesh isn't the best. And a lot of the times what I'll do is instead of creating a new retopology from scratch, I will take this into Blender and I will just duplicate it and just like delete the sections that I don't like and just rebuild those. So that's like a quick way of doing it. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend it if you're doing it for production, especially on a big production. But it is a way that helps. And you can spend time, like like polygrouping the areas that you really care about as far as doing lines. But I will show you guys one a retopo that I created recently.
One more
Before.
question.
Mhm.
Ellen in the chat says, Prashan, are you open to us reaching out by email, LinkedIn, or some other way later for more questions? I'm in love with seeing your workflow and thought process.
Yeah. Uh, Find me on Instagram. That would be the one I check the most. Um, but hold on, I gotta show you guys this retopology I did. It's, mm, 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 mm. Okay. I'm gonna switch it back to Blender here. I do get this retopology question a lot because I show my like process in some of my videos, but I don't show the retopology step because it's really boring. Um, yeah. Let's see. Go. So this is like a retopology that I created. Like, so I don't know if you guys know, but somebody released a video of a blue sky production universal model on YouTube recently. And I think that's their like internal like model from their pipeline. So I just looking at the video, I recreated the whole topology. But this is basically, I found this to be pretty effective. Um, it's not kind of like your standard, like you don't see like the loops going around the mouth here. Sometimes these characters have loops going around the mouth. In the blue sky version, they have it going right down, which kind of makes sense based depending on the character, because when you open your mouth, like the muscles kind of line up like that. But if you have a really old character with like wrinkles all the way around and stuff like that, this may not work. But yeah. So just wanted to show you guys this because I thought it was pretty cool at what they had. And they had all these like sections marked off where they had where they attached the rig to the body. But yeah. But for nails, this wasn't there. I like to have a little bit of topology around my nails just for a little bit more detail. I always think that is a nice touch. So that's another thing. Um, Again, like these base meshes, you know, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Like for example, if I have a character with a large nose, I will have to make new topology there. Yeah. Yep. And I do the retopology in Blender too. So, and I use very basic tools. I don't use special retopology add-ons or anything. I literally use this modeling tools to retopologize. Yeah. I'm a big fan of keeping your tools at a small number so you can get very good at those tools as opposed to using very, very advanced tools and then forgetting how to use them. you know. So yeah. Any
Amazing.
questions? But yeah, this is how far the elephant came. But yeah, the Elliot, I guess, the name.
It's the elephant.
He came out very cute.
All
More
right.
questions?
More
If
questions.
not, thank you for being here and thank you everyone for joining. This has been a very long day. No, we couldn't have done this without everyone's support.
All right.
Yeah, you're welcome
Thanks for
to.
having me. Yeah.
I guess, like, are you okay with staying around and answering questions, or you need to go?
Yep. I'll be on. Are you guys ending the event at
It
this
doesn't
point
end
or?
until 10, but all the panels are like from 8 to 9. So there's Yutong and Jess panel for freelancing career if you want to jump in that, or like I said, we can all stay here and talk about Elliot. Yes,
Yeah. Yeah, feel free to ask any other questions. Yeah, another trick, I always I use UV to transfer sections to Blender, because if I can UV in ZBrush using UV by Polypaint, so I can regain those separated sections in Blender. So basically a way of keeping the Polypaint in Blender. So it's Polygroup, not Polypaint. Yeah, and yeah, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram.
I did send Instagram to the chat, so if you guys want to check out his work on Instagram, it's there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna double check that that was okay because I popped in late, but everything that you've talked about so far, I'm so excited to see. I've just recently got into ZBrush with my class, and I am so excited to see all these new tips and tricks. Like you have no idea.
Yeah, it's a very like big tool. Oh gosh, it looks horrible. Like I would say it's very it can be very daunting. Um, if I were to teach a class in ZBrush, I would almost like separate out like levels. Like
Yeah.
level 1, you're only allowed to use these tools, and level 2, you're only allowed to use these tools. Like so it's like almost like you have to power up before you can use like the certain tools. Um, like there are like so many different brushes. Like if you look under brush, I mean, if you like this is stuff that ZBrush ships. There's like this many smooth brushes just for smoothing, you know. So there's like a ton of stuff in ZBrush that um, is useful, but can be overwhelming. So I would try to keep it as simple as possible.
I think hearing you talk about polygroups and figuring out like the retopology, like moving from that, it makes so much more sense. And I'm so excited to move forward. So I really appreciate your talk so far. So I just want to say
You,
thank you for that.
you are welcome. Yeah, modeled quite a few elephants. Um, yeah, I remember I think one of the first animations I ever watched was like the Jungle Book and like the elephant scene. Like it's like clear in my head just from like childhood.
I was thinking that the entire time you were modeling this guy, and I'm like, it reminds me of the baby elephant from the Jungle Book.
I don't think I can shake it as much, you know.
Yeah.
And I modeled him twice, like the baby elephant.
I was immediately thinking of Tarzan. I loved Tarzan. So the like the big eyes, especially one of my favorites.
Yeah. Yeah, I can show you hopefully the baby elephant I modeled from Jungle Book. Just recreated it. This Hathi from Jungle Book.
Yeah.
But basically, yeah, I think I have layers here. So I use layers sometimes. Layers are useful. I ended up rigging him and giving him a little walk cycle, but I keep the ears separate, I think, and the hair separate in here. But yeah. Yeah. Back to Elliot. Any more questions? So, no. Yeah, we can call it if yeah, if you're done.
Hello. If you
Yeah,
are-
technically the panel was over.
Panel was done 18 minutes ago.
We're just
It's really only the
gonna
lounge.
create like a full short
We're
film
just hanging
tonight, to be
out.
honest.
We have like Utah and Jess have gone overtime too, so we're just kind of hanging out watching. The panel was done 18 minutes ago,
Yeah.
but the event doesn't end till 10, so it's up to you if you want. If you need to head out, understandable.
Okay.
Yeah. We're on your
All
time.
right.
Yes, we're on your
All
time.
right.
See, I go, you're the one leading the demo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've been doing this
Yeah.
for a while, so.
Yeah. Well, we'll
I'll be
call
the
it.
finish, Elliot.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for
Yeah.
coming. Thank you for this wonderful demo. Like I said, guys, if you
You're
want to see
welcome.
his work, I did put his Instagram in the chat.
Yep.
You want people to follow you on LinkedIn too, or just Instagram?
Yeah, you can reach out to me in LinkedIn. You might be confused. I don't have like any animation stuff on LinkedIn. But yeah, recently I did go full time in animation, so I'll probably change some of this, some of my LinkedIn stuff. But yeah, feel free to reach out. Yeah.
Oh,
All right.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you guys.
so much.
Hope you had
Thank you
fun.
for this.
You're welcome.
I'm gonna pause it.